Tomorrow will be the culmination of Fleet Week, which is being celebrated in our area. I don't know if it's celebrated anywhere else in the United States, but it is a huge event in New York City, with thousands of sailors, Marines, and Coast Guard personnel all around the city, giving tours of the various ships that have come in and facilities around Long Island and the metro area, including flybys from the Air Force, and Blue Thunder, I think, was going by, and several other groups, and really quite an amazing reminder of the service that people offer for our protection and for the well-being of this country. In recognition of Memorial Day, this prayer. Spirit of life, whom we have called by many names, in thanksgiving and in anguish, bless the poets and those who mourn, send peace for the soldiers who did not make the wars, but whose lives were consumed by them. Let strong trees grow above graves far from home. Breathe through the arms of their branches. The earth will swallow your tears while the dead sing, no more, never again, remember me. For the wounded ones and those who received them back, let there be someone ready when the memories come, when the scars pull and the buried metal moves, and forgiveness for those of us who were not there for our ignorance. And in us, veterans in a forest of 1,000 fallen promises, let new leaves of protest grow on our stumps. Give us courage to answer the cry of humanity's pain, and with our bare hands, out of full hearts, with all our intelligence, let us create the peace. Those words from Barbara Peskin, Unitarian Universalist minister. And a few words about Memorial Day. There are many stories about its beginning. Its first observance was May 30, 1868, when flowers were placed on the graves of Union and Confederate soldiers at Arlington National Cemetery. Since World War I, Memorial Day has been commemorated as a day to honor all men and women who have died while serving in our nation's military. On Memorial Day, our nation pauses to express its appreciation to those who have served and who continue to serve in our nation's armed forces. On Memorial Day, we remember our comrades in uniform whom we have loved and lost in service to our nation. We express gratitude for their lives and their sacrifices, even as we risk our own. On Memorial Day, no matter our feelings about war, we remember the sacrifices that have been made. May we honor the lives of those who have died, and may we reach out in love to our living veterans and their families, extending the olive branch of acceptance and respect as our faith calls us to each and every day. War is a horror. May we never use Memorial Day as a time to glorify militarism or the killing and destructiveness of this human aberration that we call war. We yearn for peace, and we pray for the day when nations pursue understanding over violence in resolving disputes. These words from Floyd Vernon Chandler, Army chaplain. I don't know if you are aware of this, but as the years have gone by, more and more Unitarian ministers have gone into military service as chaplains, and they are serving on many different fronts. The name of today's service is Reunions and Returns, partly because this is the season of chapters in people's lives closing and new chapters opening. The chapters that are closing are, of course, the passages from one life stage into another as we watch high school students and college graduates progress out of their educational facilities and into the world. And it's also the time when people come together in reunion. They go back, they return to those scenes and places. And for some of you, as we heard earlier, it's also the time for family reunions. So I want to share some thoughts about all of these things. First of all, I will mention that last weekend, I went to my 50th high school reunion. my 50th. It was a big deal. I was not sure I was going to go because the week before I had a terrible cold, and I spent most of the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday that week just sleeping. And in the end I decided, hey, there'll never be another 50th, I'm going. I am so glad I went. It turned out to be an extremely joyful occasion. And out of all of the classes, my school was also celebrating its 125th anniversary. And of all the graduates of the school, only 4 women have gone into ministry, and 2 of us were myself and someone else were there for the service and for all the activities. Some of the people in my class I had known since I was in 3rd and 4th grade, and one of them I had known since I was 3 years old, because she lived around the corner from me in the first house my family lived in when we came to the United States from Sweden. She had forgotten this until I told her about the house, and she said, right, you did live around the corner. And I said, yeah. And guess what? You showed up later in junior high school with me, and then you showed up in high school with me. Also there were 2 friends, one of whom shared a desk with me in 3rd grade, and she still has the class picture that shows us sitting side by side at a double table like this. The other one from that 3rd grade class was the first other person I ever met whose name was Julie. And I hated her on sight because her name was Julie. Mine. I had transferred from my elementary school to another part of town when my family moved. So there were all these, special connections. And one of the wildest things that happened was during a small gathering of some of us, while we were talking about our experiences of being in high school, and how much we had hidden about our real lives from each other out of fear of being judged and rejected, We felt like outsiders. We didn't have the same kind of money that other people did. There were students in my school who came from families of enormous wealth, and they are still today the wealthiest graduates of my class. There were others who came from families that were struggling, that the school had given scholarships to go to. It was an all-girls high school. One of them called us up while we were in a meeting on the cell phone of the girl I shared my desk with. It was Glenn Close. She was in my class. She and I went to school together for 2 years, and for our 20th reunion, she and my friend Sarah rented a stretch limo that took us from her glamorous penthouse apartment across from the Metropolitan Museum of Art all the way up to Connecticut to the school, which of course caused a sensation back in the day because Fatal Attraction had just been a huge hit. Now, I have to say I was a little angry at Glenn because she'd had a permanent so that her hair looked like mine. And I thought, what is this? Everybody wants my name, my hair? That's how narcissistic we can be. You see these things, well, Glenn called in on Sarah's cell phone. Now, talk about modern technology, bringing a gift. Sarah holds her phone up. Hey, Glenn, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. I wish I could be with you guys, but I'm here filming a movie and I can't. So I said, hey, Glenn. She said, yes, Julie, because they all recognize your voice, from years ago. She said, before I bit my tongue. That happened the next day. So she said, yes, Julie. And I said, we really miss having you here. It would be so nice to be able to be in touch with you. And out of the blue, for the first time in 50 years, she gave us her personal email address. For the last 25 years, she has refused to give it because she's harassed and hounded by people who send her all kinds of junk. And you can only get in touch with her if you went through her agent. But now I know what it is. And I'm not telling you. I promised myself I would not do that. At this reunion, we dedicated a bench and a tree. The school that I went to was in Greenwich, Connecticut, and it merged with the boys' school and moved to New Haven, where it had originally been created on a farm there called Rosemary Farm. The girls' school eventually disappeared in the merger with the boys' school, and those of us who are as old as I am and older, including my mother and my aunt, who also went to this school, really were unhappy about the merger because the personality of the girls' school was completely subsumed, completely pushed under by the boys' school. The school now has a new headmaster who's English and used to be the headmaster of a private school in Morristown. And he was delightful. He was a firecracker. He was a little sprite about this size, could not have been nicer and talked with great enthusiasm about the education of women and how important it was to him to bring back the memory of the girls' school. Partly so, of course, that the women would donate more money to the school, but also because he loved spending time with us at reunion. And we, on Sunday, had planned to, so we decided as a class that we were going to dedicate a bench to students from the school and a tree to the teachers at the school. And as clergy member, I read prayers for these occasions, and they were all Unitarian prayers. And everybody loves them. Everybody loves everything Unitarian that I do in the school, including leading the memorial service for my former English teacher at the boys' school. It was very, very touching to be there. It was touching to know that there's a place where we can go and sit that is our bench. There's a tree there that is a reminder of the giant beech tree that was on the campus at the school we actually went to. On Sunday, we went down to Greenwich for a concert in the chapel that I sat in for 15 minutes every day, 5 days a week for 4 years, and where I started thinking about ministry. It's the first place I saw women standing in the front of the building leading worship service. And to me, it's sacred space. And the event for the day was not a worship service. It was scheduled as a concert by the school chorale. All students who had never been to the school. 17 and 18-year-olds who had only been in the boys' school, had never seen the Greenwich campus before, and it was the first time the headmaster had been down to see the property. The property was sold when the girls' school moved up to Wallingford, Connecticut, and merged. But the chapel is a National Historic Landmark, and it cannot be taken down or deployed. And the Japanese School of New York, which bought the campus at one point, did a fantastic refurbishment of all the stained glass windows in the chapel, and all of them, with the exception of St. Francis of Assisi, and St. Bede, it's called St. Bede's Chapel, are women. And several years ago, I asked the archivist at the school if she would send me the information about them, so I wrote a sermon called The Women in the Windows. And, being in that place for me is like, well, it's like when I was ordained. You are totally, when you're a minister, totally in church at that moment. There is nothing else in the world around you. You are just in that zone. So I approached the headmaster, whom I hadn't yet spoken to, while we were in the courtyard outside the chapel, and I said, Dr. Curtis, yes? I said, I'm Julie Newhall. I'm from the 50th reunion class. Oh, nice to meet you. You went to school here? And I said, yes. And I said, and typically there's a worship service on Sunday, but not this year. This year it's a concert. And I said, if it's all the same to you, I would really like to read some prayers before we begin. Because this is our sacred place. It's the building we all remember. It's just a jewel of a chapel, very small, stone, slate roof, stained glass windows all the way around it. And he said, I think that would be very appropriate. So when I went in, he was very gracious. He introduced me, and I got up. And I said, well, here we are again. Gales of laughter in the room, because they've all seen me do this many times before at other reunions. And I said, before we begin, I just want to say that at our discussion yesterday, we talked about the fact that when we were in high school, there was an unspoken assumption that everyone in the school was Christian. And that is just not true. It wasn't true then, and it isn't true now. So I am not reading Christian prayers. I am reading prayers for everyone present, for whatever it is that you call holy, and I want you to keep that in mind as I read the prayers. And so I read prayers from my various Unitarian prayer books. And afterwards, the chorus sang. The chorus was absolutely spectacular. They were wonderful, and they had made CDs of their songs, so I got one to take home. And at lunch, which is where I bit my tongue, I will never say bite your tongue to anyone. A woman from about the class of 1955 came up to me and she leaned over. People have a habit of leaning over me when I'm sitting, to whisper confidential things in my ear. It's like that. There's a cow in Hinduism that has one ear that's larger than the other, and the large ear is the one where people whisper their secrets. The secrets they can't tell anybody else. But the cow, which is depicted always as a giant statue, can absorb the secrets. So, of course, this woman leaned over. It happened to be my good ear. She leaned over my ear and she said, Julie. And I said, yes. just want to tell you, I loved that prayer. That was so wonderful that you named what you named, because it's true. Everybody who was not Christian, and there were Muslims in the school, there were Jews in the school, there were probably atheists in the school, because we were teenagers after all, and that's when kids start challenging all these things. They were all there, but none of them could be excused from chapel. You had to sit through it. So she said, I am so glad you said that. And so glad you had words to use to address all these mysteries that so many of us still have no names for. And I felt like, well, this is my mitzvah for the day. I offered these prayers in the spirit of universal spiritual wisdom, and that's what I try to do. So it turned out to be a wonderful reunion, and then, of course, I bit my tongue. The tongue was not so good. Now, it occurs to me, this being the season of reunions and so on, that my family has never had a family reunion. Never. The only reunions we have are at memorials and funerals. And so they're either tinged by great excitement or deep, deep sadness. I'm wondering, and I also know people, I asked this when I came back from my reunion, if any of my friends that I'd spoke to in the last few days, lisping on the phone, had ever gone to reunions. One of them said, I'd rather poke my eye with a stick. It's not that bad. And he said, oh yes it is. I am never going back to my high school. And then a friend of mine said, well, I went to a reunion of my cousins. Best thing with my cousins was I got to meet cousins I didn't know I had. Now here's a small point about my reunion. One of the girls at the reunion had been a Girl Scout with me when I was 9 years old. And I didn't know where she lived, so I asked her, and she said, well, I live in Manchester by the Sea. Have you ever heard of that? And I said, oh my God. And she said, what does that mean? And I said, I've got zillions of cousins who live there. So she said, well, who are they? What are their names? I told her the name. She said, oh no, I know all of those people. They're your cousins? Yes, they are. So small world things that happen in the, with somebody who had no connection to my family other than that we were Girl Scouts when we were young. But that was part of what the reunion brought out. I'm wondering, just for a minute, how many of you have been to a reunion of some kind? You have? Yeah. Yes. And experiences, were these good things, difficult things? Any comment? Anybody wants to share about it?
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
I've been on my high school reunion committee since our 10th year, and we have them every 5 years.
Yeah.
And we also shared our 50th and our 55th birthdays together in between, so we'll do our 60th as well.
Very nice.
Great.
At the end of this one, someone said, okay, to our 60th. And I thought, oh my God. Anyone else? Yeah, Barb.
Two things. The reunion I went to was actually a family reunion, and it was pretty enjoyable.
Yeah.
So to speak. But the thing,
So to speak.
it's so many people you just don't know, and you don't really know what to say.
Right.
Like, so who are you? How are you related? What do you do for a living? You're done.
Yeah.
But the thing about reunions, and being as young as I am, we don't have high school reunions because everyone's on Facebook or other social media things. And I don't even know what year it would be. We haven't had one, and there's no talk of anyone ever because anybody that you want to talk to, you can talk to on Facebook, and people comment and write. So as everyone's gotten married and had babies and everything, we all know. Like, there's no mystery. So when you go to a reunion, it's just actually seeing them in person. You don't have to share the stories.
Hold on. There I go.
Yeah.
This reminds me, this morning I looked up reunions on, Wikipedia and Google and all that, and up came all kinds of images of cards that people send each other, and one that repeated throughout was, why have a reunion? I already saw you on Facebook and I know you're fat now.
Oh, that too.
That came up over and over. That came up several times in different ways. And so there is that point, if you're on Facebook.
Yeah.
There's no felt need yet to be together with these people.
Well, yes.
Yeah, that may change as I get older. Anybody else? Hank?
I went to my 20th and my 50th, and of course there was no Facebook at that time.
Yeah.
But I walked up to a person, I'd been a friend of mine when I was a kid, a very good friend. I had not had much contact with any of these people. Yeah. I walked up and I said, this was Al Smith. I said, Al, I thought you were dead. was just an impulse. And he said, no, Hank, I'm still very much alive. And I said, thank goodness, you know.
Any other sharing? Yeah.
My mother has a very large family, and I go there, and this has been going on since I was a child, is that a great, you can't tell, it's the WASP side of the family, so they call me Arlene, and they call me R to be close. Like, hey R, how's this, how's that? But you don't know who knows that that's not my name, but they're just too polite to correct the incorrect people, and who doesn't know it. It's just, so now friends of mine on the internet call me R.
There was one person of mine whose nickname in high school was Dewey, D-U-I-E. Her real name is Dorinda, which I think is a Scottish name. And at school she was always called Dewey, but at reunion she made it very clear that she does not use that name. She asked all of us very kindly to stop calling her Dewey. So we've made a concerted effort to call her Dorinda. And you know, it only took 50 years for this class to go around the class. A couple of humorous things have come up in connection with thinking about reunions. And one is a greeting card that says, I don't want to brag or make anyone jealous, but I can still fit into the earrings I wore in high school. And then another, a reunion. It's a relationship. A reunion. It's a relationship where you can act like complete idiots all together at the same time. Nobody at mine was acting like idiots, really. But the thing I think about with reunions is the fact that it's the coming together again. You know, the return is going out and coming back. The reunion is the reuniting. And there's some sayings around that. One, for instance, that every parting is a form of death, as every reunion is a form of rebirth. And it's something to consider, because when you go into these, you may anticipate knowing who the people are in front of you, and of course, like you, in some ways, they will have changed. They will have changed drastically, physically, or not. They will have changed emotionally and spiritually as well, or not. So the important way to move into the reunion is just to be open to what's coming toward you, to embrace whoever is there. And this is a reading that I think applies to that very nicely. Let the stars keep track of us. Let us ride our own orbits and trust that they will meet. May our reunion be not a finding, but a sweet collision of our destinies. So, one more reading I'd like to share with you is the whole notion of life as a circle, as a spiral. I'm wearing here a koru. It's a Maori carving. Some of you may have seen this on other people. This one I got in New Zealand, where I, as some of you know, spent a lot of time. It's carved out of bone. It's called a koru, K-O-R-U. It's carved in the shape of a spiral, but more specifically, a fiddlehead fern. Some of you have seen these. If you go on the internet and you cue in spiral, you will see that there are thousands of images of spirals, that they appear in all sorts of natural forms, such as the tail of a seahorse, or the tail of a chameleon, in the form of leaves from plants, in the shape of certain branches from filbert trees, also known as hazelnut trees, in the shape of faces. It's the Fibonacci sequence that will also show you how to diagram things into spiral format. It is a universal shape in nature. And it's closely related to this other one I have. This is also a koru, but it's been carved to show you that it comes out of a circle. You know, and this is also important to remember, because a circle, yes, is an unbroken line, yeah, that goes around and around. And if you leave the outer edge and go inside, you go into the spiral mode. And when you think about life, and when you think about this faith, the image of a spiral should come to mind, because this religion started as a response to the Reformation. It started in its earliest days, back in the 3rd century and the 4th century and so on, as a response to certain teachings about theological principles. And over time, it has gone around and around, up out of its starting point, around and up to include many different movements as it's gone, so that it has become the tradition it is today. It's important to remember that. And I say that because I've worked in congregations where people wanted to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They wanted to forget all the history behind Unitarianism and Universalism. They wanted to live only in the moment that we're in today. But the only way to really appreciate the moment we're in today is to know what we came out of, just as it is with knowing who your ancestors are. Ralph Waldo Emerson himself said, "Every man is a quotation from all his ancestors." Isn't that a nice thought? All his ancestors. So those reunions are opportunities to come in contact with your ancestors, to find out about them. And in terms of the circle that goes around, that moves and shifts and goes up and then collapses again, this is what Black Elk and Oglala Sioux has written. Everything the power of the world does is in a circle. The sky is round, and I have heard that the earth is round like a ball, and so are the stars. The wind in its greatest power whirls. Birds make their nests in circles, for theirs is the same religion as ours. The sun comes forth and goes down again in a circle. Even the seasons form a great circle in their changing, and always come back again to where they were. The life of a man or a woman is a circle, from childhood to childhood. And so it is in everything where power moves. I urge you to be open to the possibility of circles in your life. This morning I was watching television, and they were talking about Fleet Week, and up came a story that caused everyone listening to it to go right into tears. It was about an American military person, I don't remember which service he was in, who had been serving in Iraq during the time when Saddam Hussein was attacking the Kurds. He was able to evacuate a Kurdish woman. He somehow got papers, exit papers, to get her out of the country. But she had a baby. And the baby's name did not appear on a list that he could use. So he gave the baby his last name. His last name was Gray. He gave the baby his last name, and he told us to the camera, he figured everyone would assume she was related to him because she had his name. And he got her out along with the mother. They eventually ended up in Atlanta. And last week, the girl, who is now 18, graduated from high school. She sent an invitation to him to come to her graduation. That was the first time he had seen her since she was literally this size. So, their lives had come full circle. They reconnected. They were reunited in a totally unexpected way. And this is one of the beauties of life, that the unexpected is around us all the time.